Moving on to the next category of biological molecules, remembering that those categories were carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Lipids, unlike carbohydrates, lipids are hydrophobic. If you've taken a nutrition class, you know that lipids also have the most energy per gram or the most calories per weight. Carbs and proteins have 4 calories per weight, lipids have 9. If you're consuming a lot of lipids, that might not be good for you as a human, depending on the types of lipids you're consuming. But a fat little bird like this stores up on lipids before they fly south for the winter. Since lipids contain the most energy per weight, this fat little bird prefers to stock up on them for the intensely demanding migration south. So, kind of like the birds trying to get a lunchbox that does not weigh too much. Lipids do some really important things for us, the most important being energy storage, but they also do things like insulation and cushioning. We all know about baby fat, especially on our posterior area. Uh, Simply put, this fat provides cushioning when we fall as we're learning to walk. In our diets, lipids are more like having a check from somebody rather than the cash of carbohydrates. You have to deposit the check in the bank of fat deposits, and then you have to withdraw the cash, the energy, at a later point to buy some ATP. Triglycerides are such named because they have 3 fatty acid tails and one glycerol head to them. These are the major dietary currency. Those 3 fatty acid tails there, they can be saturated with tons of hydrogens, or they can be unsaturated where some of those hydrogens have been removed. Whenever I talk about triglycerides, I just can't help but think of the movie Fight Club when there's I'm sorry, when they're stealing a bag of fat from the plastic surgery center because they want to make explosives with the fat, and the bag of fat goes I'm sorry, it goes over the barbed wire, and all of the fat starts spilling all over the place, and he's like trying to hold up the bag. I'm sorry, I know that movie is old at this point, but it's still a good one about the irony of humanism. Trans fats are a type of unsaturated fat that's been chemically altered in a process called hydrogenation. You ever hear partially hydrogenated? Normally, unsaturated fats have a kink or a bend in their structure because the double bond kind of bends that, just like that triglyceride there. This bend, it allows the fat molecules to remain liquid at room temperature or quasi-liquid. However, so during the process of hydrogenation, some of these bent molecules are changed so that they have a straight shape. And that makes them behave more like a saturated fat at room temperature. So, trans fats are created by changing the chemical structure of an unsaturated fat in a way that makes them more solid. This change in structure is also what makes trans fats unhealthy and different from other types of food. A common example of a food containing trans fat is margarine or shortening, which I want to say I ate for my entire lifetime until I moved out of my parents' house and started eating butter. Okay, so margarine shortening are constantly used in processed foods and especially baked goods at the bakery, right? Because margarine or shortening has a longer amount of time that it can go without becoming rancid, and therefore lots of bakeries make their foods out of partially hydrogenated. Many of them use a 50-50 butter margarine kind of mix. So these foods, like some potato chips, some cookies, french fries, snack foods, they might have a label saying partially hydrogenated oils. which means that it's potential they contain trans fats. For example, so imagine that you are eating a piece of store-bought pie, and the crust might be made with hydrogenated vegetable oil, which contains trans fats, right? But it also makes the pie crust crispy, flaky, and it allows the bakery to keep that pie on the shelf for a little bit more time to make money. The hydrogenation process actually helps the oil stay solid and it maintains its temperature, but it also creates the trans fats, which can have negative effects on your health. You know what? The rule of thumb is if it's solid at room temperature, it's probably solid in your body. If it lasts long on the shelf, it probably lasts a long time in your body. Trans fats are used in lots of processed foods because they're cheap, they help extend the life of the food, and they create a desirable texture that humans tend to like making things crispy or flaky. However, over time, as we've learned more about their harmful effects, many food manufacturers have started to remove trans fats from their products. Omega-3 fatty acids are a type of polyunsaturated fat that are essential for human health. You have to obtain them in your diet because your body does not make omega-3 fatty acids. Omega 3s are known to, I mean, like everything, right? Everything reduces inflammation. But omega 3s, they also help you lower triglycerides. They help you manage your LDLs and HDLs, your cholesterol, and therefore they increase cardiovascular health. They also contribute to brain development, which is why you see DHA omega 3s advertised on many child supplement drinks. And I only know that from watching TV. Of course, eating foods naturally high in omega 3s means that you don't have to take the fish oil pills and burp them up all day. I'm kidding. But of course, if you eat the food that is high in the nutrition, that's always a good thing. You have to want to eat things like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, which I know can be hard if you don't live in an area where the ocean is like right there. I like to eat fish, but I do not like to eat those fish. Salmon, mackerel, and sardines. No. Thank goodness that omega 3s are found in flaxseed, chia seeds, and walnuts. A wax is a type of lipid that's composed of like really long chains of fatty acids. Waxes they're hydrophobic, right, making them water repellent, and they're typically solid at room temperature due to those long hydrocarbon chains. Many plants have a waxy layer on their leaves and stems, and it's known as the cuticle, and it prevents water loss and protects against environmental damage. Bees produce beeswax to build honeycomb, while whales produce spermaceti, a wax found in their heads. Waxes are usually used for us as humans in candles, polishes, cosmetics, like lip balms, and waterproofing products, like I think it's called silicone glove, uh, which is great. I used to work on the Hudson River in the wintertime. Your hands would get chapped and cracked and broken. There would be times when I couldn't put my hands into the pockets of my pants to get my keys. And I found silicone glove, which was basically just what it says. It's a silicone covering for your hands. Ugh, worked so well. Anyway, biologically, waxes serve as barriers and insulators, helping organisms retain moisture and protect against harsh conditions, kind of like those that we find in the desert that this succulent plant here would be exposed to. Right? Their chemical stability and the fact that they're hydrophobic in nature make them really valuable to animals and plants living in hot environments. Our third and final category of lipids is phospholipids. And these are very important for us here in this class because they form the basic structure of cell membranes. They look like a balloon with two strings on it. And the two strings are the fatty acids. They have this polar head. It's polar up here, so water loving. And then they have these two non-polar tails. So this is the first molecule we've seen that has both polar and non-polar components to it. Cell membranes are composed of a phospholipid bilayer, or a double layer of phospholipids arranged very specifically. In fact, if you put phospholipids in water and shake them up, they'll form these little bubbles here. I mean, it might take a long time, like a millennia, but, if you extend the timeline to infinity, anything is possible, which is also a quote from Fight Club. The polar heads of phospholipids are exposed to the water inside and outside of this little phospholipid. Right here's inside and here's outside, and that's water-based. And those polar heads are exposed to the water-based inside and outside. The non-polar tails are like facing each other, and this forms a bilayer with a non-polar region right in the center of it, sandwiched between those non-polar heads. The polar heads are kind of like the bread, and I guess that non-polar region is whatever you like to have inside your sandwich. Hummus, jelly, fluff, whatever it is that you prefer. All right, moving on from triglycerides. We have a second kind of lipid here, which is called a sterol. Sterols are huge molecules, and they're made from cholesterol. Cholesterol is necessary in your diet, right? And it's necessary because you have to make these steroid-type hormones like testosterone and estrogen. Other steroid hormones of note are the glucocorticoids, like cortisol, which is released from your adrenal gland when you are stressed, and hormones called mineralocorticoids, like aldosterone, which monitors the sodium balance and the potassium balance in your body by influencing the kidney. Also, the bile that is made by your liver is made of cholesterol, right? Because as we've learned from a previous mini lecture, like dissolves like. So if you want to digest or break down any cholesterol-based things that you're eating, you need bile, a cholesterol non-polar substance, to do that.